Okay, getting all the baits rigged up right now to get a deep dive into the month of June. June is probably one of my favorite months to go bass fishing, of course. Like, I love every month, you guys know me, but June is really good. Like, a lot of stuff is sort of transpiring, some things are sort of falling out. Like, this is like the last sort of month in down south that like a lot of the fish are done spawning, most of 90%, 99% of them. Some of the, now this is what's crazy, some bass will still pull up in the month of June. Do not, like, Florida strain bass in the south will pull up and start spawning in the month of June. Now, I'm gonna talk about this additionally to my friends in the north. Like, this is like, now in Indiana, this is probably like the month they start to get out a little bit, but it's also post-spawn a little bit. It's sort of interesting in the Midwest. Up, northern part of the country, Minnesota, New York. This is like prime time spawn, like right smack dab in the middle. So this is sort of an interesting time of the year down here, down south, but I try to bring in a lot of different things to each month so that way you guys at least know sort of what's going on. If you do live in the northern parts of the country and things are a little bit further behind, the previous months are sort of my mindset of what I would recommend for you. Pay attention to what I say with water temperatures and stuff like that, because that's what but I will also talk a little bit about some of the things that I see transpiring. Now, but down here in the south, before we jump into this, you all have asked. There's been several comments that said, man, Wheeler, thank you so much for telling us the baits, but please show us where to start. And I'm like, I get that. Like, you guys just want to know where to start at, what to do. So I'm picking up an old paper map of a lake that I've never been to before. But I'm going to show you exactly sort of what my mindset is when I go, and I'm going to go through the lures first, and then I'm going to say, hey, this lure, this is what I'm going to look, this is sort of the kind of stuff I'm looking for here. That lure, this is the kind of stuff I'm looking for there. So that gives you an understanding of where my mind is, and then also that can translate into maybe you guys finding them on the body of water you're fishing or bank fishing. So I wanted to have a little bit of it all here. So let's jump into it right now. So first bait for the month of June. June's a very unique month, and I go back and forth on it. I don't even know if I picked the right. I picked a lot of good stuff, and I don't even know if I picked it. I picked a lot of baits too. First bait I'm going to select this rod right here. This is my 7.3 heavy action, a worm. Hey, you cannot go wrong. Water temperature goes up into the high 70s and the low 80s. This one, you might as well just put this on your rod for the next 3 months. June, July, August, big worm, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest worm in the box. Green pumpkin, this is a plum apple one right here. One thing that I will tell you, I've had issues in the past with hookup ratios on a big worm. I have. They bite it, there's a lot of plastic there, they go bop, bop, bop. You set the hook and you miss them. One thing that I will say, I do typically, if I'm fishing brush piles, I'll peg my weight. If I'm fishing grass, I'll keep it unpegged. So this is something that if you're fishing schools of fish, or if you're doing a big worm is a phenomenal bait to throw flipping this time of year. It's a phenomenal bait to throw offshore in brush. It's a phenomenal bait to throw in grass. It does not matter. It's a great bait to throw at night. It's just one that I always have tied on. It's old school, it catches bass, and in that scenario, like for me, I look at this and I'm like, dude, it's just one that I always have tied on, and it catches a lot of fish. As far as weight, I'll throw a quarter a lot if I'm fishing shallower around grass. If I'm fishing deeper, 3/8. The big key with this whole setup is that right there, the hook, okay? When you select a worm hook, the key with this, if you really want to be serious, if your hook point right here is in line with your line tie, okay? This one's not. There's a lot of gap between there. You probably won't catch a lot of bass on that hook. This hook right here is the VMC Redline hook. It's a premium hook, so I know all of you won't necessarily be picking up this hook. It's a hybrid worm hook, okay? This one right here. If you are serious about hookup ratio on your big worm this summer, make sure to check out that Redline hybrid worm hook, 4/0, 5/0. You can go to 3/0 too. The other thing that I'm going to tell you as well is when the fish bites that worm, casting it out there, that's the one you can jump the gun too early on a big worm because there is a lot of soft plastics there. He goes doop doop doop. I don't go thump thump thump. I let the fish have a big worm a little bit longer. So 3 to 5 seconds. He goes thump thump. 1, 2, 3. Set the hook. We're up the slats the hook. Okay. Other thing you want to look at too. This is getting in depth. I'm giving you guys the goods. Pay attention to which direction the fish is swimming, okay? A lot of times the worst issue is like when the fish, I've lost a lot of fish this way too, is when I have a fish go thump, 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 or bite it, and I'm letting him swim off with it, and he's swimming to me, okay? And then what happens, okay? You're letting him swim to it 4 or 5 seconds, he's halfway to the boat, and you reel down and you do not get a good hook set, and you whiff. Also, that blows that fish's mouth open. If a fish is going the opposite way, like it goes dum dum, they're not going to drop it. 90% of the time, they're not going to drop it. I mean, I'm not going to say all the time. I've never had them really. When they come into a big worm, it's like doop doop. They just they keep going, and it's like, you know, to me, they don't drop a big worm. They don't. All right, we got the next door neighbors lawn care. We got everybody's getting everything taken care of. Hold on. Hopefully you guys don't hear that in the background, but this is the deal. Like, that worm's always good. Colors, there's a lot of different ones. One of my favorites is plum apple. That's always been one of my favorites. Red bug, plum apple, green pumpkins. Let me know. Blue flex, another one, underrated. Like, I've thrown a lot of different ones. I don't think you necessarily have to throw a giant worm to catch them. There's also worms like straight tail worms that you could throw this time of year if you want to have like a bigger profile worm and it not be necessarily as long. It's a little bit easier to flip like that kind of worm. Like it's like a 6-inch worm, I think, something like that, 7-inch. So like you can go either way, but I think that streamlined worm, it's good from shallow water to deep water, and it works really well for those fish. I feel like they just like that stream. And that's one that I might keep in the lineup. I don't know yet. We'll see for the next month, but we'll sort of see what happens. For some of you, your favorite top water fishing, the month of June is really good as well. A lot of the times, the bluegill spawn is transpiring right now. Anytime there's a full moon, we have a full moon here beginning of the month. A group of bluegill will pull up and spawn, typically down, and they just bass that are not out offshore are going to be in the shallow pockets and bays and whatnot, eating on bluegill. One of my favorite baits to throw during that time is a buzzbait, okay? Covering water, especially highland reservoirs, around pieces of wood. These bass will start to wolf pack, especially middle of June, or right around that, they'll be up there. Like Gunnersville, there's bass on bluegill beds. They'll bite top waters, and sort of like, they'll bite, wacky rigs, all that stuff. So like sort of like the bluegill bed like deal. Prop bait, definitely. Buzz bait, if I want to keep it over their head, prop bait. This is a Rapala X-Rap prop. Moving that, let it sit there. If the fish are up there shallower, the bluegill beds are shallower, I'm going to pick that buzz bait up. So that's sort of the mindset. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be fishing bluegill beds to be catching these bass. There's bass in the backs of creeks, there's bass that are up shallow, regardless, still this time of year, and a buzzbait still catches them and catches big ones at that. So this one has a black toad on it. This is Accent Buzzbait too. Just a heads up, you guys know that I had my own buzzbait, Accent Bait Company, a small company now in Gunnersville area around Scottsboro. This buzzbait is my signature series buzzbait, and it is obviously in my opinion, it's the best one out there on the market. I love it. And I use it with a skirt on it. I'll use it with a toad. It just sort of depends on what I've got going on. But this is color-wise, as far as toad, black, green pumpkin, if you're bluegill, white. I keep it simple. Those three, boom, done. Now, sort of along the lines of the shallow water deal, a wacky worm. You got to have a wacky rig tied up. Coupling that with some crossover pliers, okay? So if you're trying to not sling off your Senkos and all your, you got to have either some O-rings or something like that. And the crossover pliers from VMC, they come with a crossover band, and the band is what's on this worm right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. It has more surface area. This is actually a size number 4. It's a little bit small for a 5-inch like Senkos type bait. I would recommend like a size number 5 millimeters. It's 5 millimeters. and it has a channel that basically you can do horizontal or perpendicular. So you can go crossways or you can go along the worm. So typically I go cross. And so that's a good band for that, to secure your worm and not necessarily lose a lot of worms throughout the day. So that's sort of the rundown on the bluegill type stuff, at least bluegill spawn. Let's talk a little bit of ledge fishing. Two baits that I think you have to have if you're a ledge fisherman and you want to be a good ledge fisherman, you have to learn to get good at or understand. Number one, a football jig. A football jig is one of my favorites. I don't really necessarily have a favorite football jig. I just throw quite a few different ones. I throw a crawl style bait in the back of them. This dude right here is pretty good. And then as far as colors go, green pumpkins, this is more like a natural crawl color. The cool thing about a football jig, and the reason why I say a football jig is really important, is because number one, you can drag it, you can cast it out there, you can reel it, hit it in the bottom, sort of like a hard head or something like that. In addition to that, you can hop it. So depending on the way the fish are set up and the mood of the fish, you have multiple ways to target those fish with the exact same lure and same bait, depending on how those fish are set up. So if they're scattered out, a lot of times I'm just dragging that bait, trying to impart, just trying to get one of those fish to bite it, or reeling it, trying to be very subtle down in the bottom. I'm just a crawling on the bottom. Don't mind me, Mr. Bass, you know what I'm saying? And then if there's a lot of bass there, I might be snapping, I might be hopping and stroking it. So it just really depends on the demeanor of the fish and the demeanor of the spot. Sometimes there's a lot of fish on the spot, sometimes there's just a few. You got to sort of figure that out. But that's why I think a football jig is really good. Now, as far as what line I use this jig on, 14-pound Suffix Advanced Fluorocarbon is what I personally use. It's a 7.6 heavy action rod. Parabolic bend is for me, that's what I like to use. And if you're gonna go like on a more of an expensive rod, a football jig is not a bad idea to do it, because it's like, you want something pretty sensitive in that scenario. So that's one for the offshore bait. Number two for the offshore baits, a deep diving crankbait. You guys know I love the throw crankbait, and still is the #1 offshore bait in the country, hands down. I truly, day in and day out, a crankbait generates a lot of big fish into biting. This is a DT16. A DT20 is one of my favorites as well. I always have one tied on. DT16 will cast a little bit farther. It runs about 17 feet deep. You can even get down there in 18 if you make the right cast. The DT20 gets around that 20-foot mark, but definitely easily in that 18, 19-foot zone. So the key is with a deep diving crankbait, if you're new to that, you want to make sure that you're picking a crankbait that is hitting the bottom. So you'll see even on this bill, you can see it's scuffed up. I don't know if you can see that. You got it? Yeah. Okay, so that bill's scuffed up, and that is what you want. You want that crankbait to be hitting the bottom like that, because when you crank that crankbait down there, the other thing that I see a lot of anglers, is young anglers and old anglers alike, when you throw a deep diving crankbait out there and you're throwing into the middle of a school, you gotta crank that son of a gun. I mean, like, speed is your friend. Like, I could throw the same crankbait, throw it out there, and that crankbait's just going through there real slow. And in bass, when the water temperature gets up, speed is more so your friend now than ever before. Those fish can see it just fine. When they get too good a look at it most of the time, they're not gonna bite it. Speed is your friend, and a deep diving crankbait generates bites better than a lot of baits out there on the market, and it still does. I don't think it'll ever change. It's top 3 ledge baits of all time, period, done, end of story. You gotta have a crankbait in your lineup if you're gonna go ledge fisherman as a ledge fisherman. So that is, what is that, number 5 technically? I think it's number 5. So I've went through all those, and I have one extra one in this scenario, because I do think, this is sort of a bite that happened a lot in Indiana, okay? So like, there was sort of a bite that went down post-spawn. A lot of our fish hadn't gone offshore yet, and it's not necessarily always like Tennessee River stuff, but there's 2 different bites that happen. One is like they get on the rocks, like riprap banks, seawall, stuff like that. And this technique is one of the favorite ways to do that. It's throwing a square bill. All right, a square bill is probably one of the most underrated summertime baits to throw. Typically, you need a little bit of more stained water, or you really don't even need that much stained water, because I remember fishing on Morris in Indiana, small lake in Indiana. Water's fairly clean. You change your water, you change your color depending on what your water clarity is. And I was throwing bluegill color crankbait, square bills, catching them down those rocks, and dude, we just cracked them throughout the years. It was unbelievable fish. A lot of Thursday nighters out there at Moore's. Guys had more grass. They really weren't like that as much. And I caught some on wood as well as the summer would go on. But a square bill is awesome. I have a couple different colors. This is like citrus, like Brutus, something of citrus. I forget. What is it?
Bruised citrus.
Bruised citrus shad. Brody knows. Bruised citrus shad right there. And then this guy right here, I think it's just like green, copper green shad, I'm saying. Copper green shad. That's a good bluegill imitator if you're trying to imitate a bluegill. And then if the water's a little bit more dirty, this guy right here is like, I don't even know the exact name of him, but he's awesome too. And this is Ott's crankbait right here. This is the OG Rocco. So I'm talking about rocks, and Rocco's good. Now that we sort of talked about all these baits, okay, this bait is really good. I crank it on rocks. I make sure I hit bottom content. It'll run about 5 foot deep, 12 pound Suffolk Advanced fluorocarbon, 7.2 medium heavy action crankbait rod is what I'm using. This is graphite composite. That's what I personally throw. 6/8 to 1 gear ratio. Real, you can throw a 7 to 1. Again, speed is your friend in this scenario. You're not really pre-spawn, you crank your crankbait down there and you're wanting to touch those rocks and pull it a little bit more because the fish are more lethargic. Summertime, you got to make them react, and that is a good bait to do that. So now, because of the comments you guys have dropped below, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the locations on the body of water that you guys need to focus on with these techniques, okay? So, because you guys asked, you shall receive. This is a lake that I've never made a cast on, but it's a place that has creek channels, has road beds. This is just a map. I'm not saying they're going to get on these spots or anything like that. I mean, you guys be like, that place doesn't have any fish, or that place is awesome. I don't know. I just want to use this as an understanding of like what I sort of see when I look at this body of water. So here's a big lake. There's a dam down here. There's giant flats down here on the south end. There's some big creek channels that are flat. You got some more contour down here towards the dam, a little bit steeper in some of these little pockets and places. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is ledge fishing and what I'm going to focus on. So offshore ledges or points. This place is not a ledge lake, or it's not necessarily a ledge like a TVA impoundment, but it has points and stuff. So anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is look at this creek channel right here. Okay, creek channel. This is the main river, main channel, and then I'm also going to look at spawning areas. So up here, there's some major spawning areas right here. There's a spawning area right there. This flat right here, I'm sure there's some bass that spawn up in this area as well. Of course, anywhere there's major spawning areas, there's got to be a point where those fish stop. And typically roads and points are always a good way, channel swings. Okay, first thing I'm gonna look at, this big giant channel swing right here, mouth of this bay, beautiful looking bay, point, channel swing right there. There's a road bed also that goes over that right there. That's a great place that I would look and start at. This giant point that comes out here contour-wise, same thing. It gives those, so the key is a lot of times with long points and why they're community holes is because those fish get on the biggest, giant, largest point or big hump out there in closest to deepest water. And the reason for that is a lot of the bait moves out that time of year and they want to get out there on those deeper places. Something sneaky, okay, when I say the word sneaky, like a sneaky place might be like an inside point like right here. It's not as obvious. Yeah, there's a creek channel ledge right there. There's multiple that look the same, but you had to graph all those to find that spot. You know, right here, right now, I can be like, hey, there's gonna be a school of bass sitting right there, you know, on that major point. And that's where the mindset goes. And so that's where I'm gonna throw my deep diving crankbaits, like this guy right here, and that's where I'm gonna be throwing my football head. Major points, places in the mouths of creeks, if they just got out there, they might be, they're always gonna be adjacent to some type of spawning area, typically, okay? Now that being said, with that being said, as the year goes on, they'll pull out to some other stuff, the deeper places. Sometimes they go the first thing, but most of the time, that is like, I look and keep it pretty straightforward at first. You don't have to go looking for all the sneaky spots in the lake. That's sort of the mindset of where I'm going to be looking for those. Okay. Next on the list would be a square bill. Okay, the square bill, the Rocco. I'm looking at places, if the bass are not offshore in your body of water, creek channels, okay, and they're done spawning, creek channel points or creek channel turns. This lake doesn't have a lot of creek channel banks, so you don't have a lot of like steeper banks. That's what I'm gonna look, or like main river creek channel banks, and then you're gonna have little places inside the creeks that have like this creek channel right here gets tighter up around this bank right here. So seawalls, rock points, rock little edges, little tighter contours. It doesn't have to be that much tighter. It just means like, you know, a 3-4 foot of water, you know, that's what I'm looking for. That's when I'm gonna throw that crankbait on the main lake, but then in the backs of the creeks, in the very backs of here, these creeks, a lot of these bass won't leave and go out here and get on this main lake point. They'll stay in the backs of these creeks. The water's a little bit dirtier. There's isolated laydowns, logs. There's some steeper banks, like one steeper bank right here in the very back of this creek that this little creek channel swings up next to. That's where I'm gonna pick up that square bill, the same thing, and then throw the Rocco. So that sort of was my mindset there when selecting that bait right there. Now bluegill spawn, a little bit different. So bluegill spawn, they're going to be in pockets, places that are protected from the winds, whatever the predominant wind is. So say it's a north wind, this one right here, they're going to be sliding there on inside that pocket in a turn where they're protected from that main lake. Typically. Now there will be bluegill that'll spawn deeper, but the ones I'm talking about are spawning in these smaller pockets. Now this place right here, the flatter areas are gonna be harder to predict where they're gonna be at. The steeper areas like this one right here, you could sort of go in and like, okay, there's a little flat. They're probably going to be in some of these little smaller pockets. That's typically easier to find the bluegill in highland reservoirs. Sometimes they'll spawn on points as well, but that's sort of like, you got to find the bluegills and then you got to find the bass that are on the bluegills. You know what I'm saying? So that's when I'm picking up that buzz bait. I'm picking up the prop bait, that X-Wrap prop. I'm throwing the Wacky Worm if I can visually see them. That's sort of the mindset, sort of combo. And I'm looking in those pockets adjacent to the main lake. I'm not saying I can't find bluegill spawns way back in the creek. I definitely can. But normally the water gets a little bit dirtier and you visually can't see what's going on. So if you can't see what's going on, you really don't know exactly what's transpiring. It's when you're utilizing your eyes to find the bluegill and the bass. And then last but not least, the big worm. I'm gonna say this whole lake is a big worm lake. I don't know that, a big worm works well. So the points with brush, you know, way up the river where there's laydowns and logs and stumps and you know, I'm gonna pick up that big worm. I'm gonna pick up a big worm fishing on shallower points in 4 to 6 foot of water and fish that still haven't moved out, that are just sort of up there. A big worm is a bait. If there's grass on these flats, casting around the backs of some of these creeks, if there is grass back here, if there's grass on these flats, that's where I'm gonna throw this big worm as well, popping it through grass, lighter weight. That's sort of the mindset in this scenario with a bigger worm. Like I think it just draws them. It's not always a big fish bait. It catches a lot of fish too. So don't be afraid of like a 10-inch worm, but I also don't necessarily think you have to have a 10-inch worm. 8-inch worms work just fine. 6-inch worm, if you have a little bit more, substance there, you know, it works well just as fine too. So ribbon tails are more the traditional old school, but straight tail worms work really well. If you want to get a little bit beefier, 6-inch or 7-inch straight tail worm, that works fine too. That's the rundown. This is what, you know, I took this lake. I'll try to take a map every time. Let me know how I can teach you guys any more, help tell you guys a few more things along the way. I wanted to bring this map out just because I've had so many comments that, hey man, just show us what you're sort of thinking and what you're wanting to see, or like where you're gonna fish. And that way it gives you all a better understanding of what my mind, like how I process the information and how I'm gonna utilize these baits. So thank you all so much for watching. Month of June, get out and go fishing. Thank you all so much. See you later.